Hey everybody, today is July 6, 2025. Welcome again to a short instructional video courtesy of investingsuccess.ca. In today's YouTube video, I want to continue probing, examining, and trying to answer the questions how and why. We know that the planets in our solar system have an effect on our emotions. Our emotions in turn affect the financial markets. But how is it that these planets affect the human psyche? What is physically happening to cause that? You'll know that there are two variants of astrology, geocentric and heliocentric. In geocentric astrology, it's assumed that we're on a moving frame of reference, and we are. We're on the planet Earth, and it's going around the sun. So we can get an astrology ephemeris table, a geocentric version, and for any given day of any given year, we can figure out where the various planets are. This is the type of astrology that I have been using in all of my writings pretty much exclusively for over a decade now. But lately I've had a bit of an awakening, as it were. There's another variant called heliocentric astrology. It assumes that we are on a fixed frame of reference. So I like to say, imagine yourself out in space standing on the sun. From that fixed reference point, you're looking out into the darkness of space, and you're going to see the various planets moving around the sun. You can get a heliocentric ephemeris table that tells you where the planets are for any given day of any given year. Why have I had this shift? Why am I starting now to look at heliocentric astrology? Well, let me explain. In my pursuit of the questions how and why, I've come across some academic work by the likes of Nicolas Scaffetta. He's a mathematician, astronomer at a university in Naples, Italy. I've also come across some of the work by Roger Tattersall, mathematician, astronomer at the University of Leeds in the UK. So what is it that these guys have written about that has made me start to look at heliocentric astrology? Well, here it is. These guys are saying that based on the data that they have analyzed, the data pertains to sunspot activity. They are suggesting that Mercury, Venus, and Earth in their orbit around the sun are capable of applying a gravitational torque to the sun. And that is pretty much in keeping with something that was laid down, a few centuries ago by Isaac Newton in his universal law of gravitational attraction. Now, Scaffetta and Tattersall and others are saying that the gravitational torque that these planets are putting on the sun is amplified, exacerbated by Jupiter. Yes, it's far out in space, but it's massive. And so there is a gravitational torque component to Jupiter. So taken together, Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Jupiter are capable of applying a torque to the surface layers of the sun. That is causing the sun then to emit more solar particles. I guess you could liken it to, taking an orange and giving it a squeeze. You might make some juice squirt out of that orange. Similar for the sun and its solar activity under the influence of torque. The solar emissions that the sun then generates are going to interact with our geomagnetic field around the planet Earth, but it's not going to repel all of them. So the net result, according to these gentlemen, is this torque force is going to affect the weather, the climate cycles on planet Earth. And I've taken it one step further. I'm saying, okay, if the gravitational torque is going to affect the climate here on Earth, it's probably going to affect our human emotion. And it's emotion. After all, we're mostly water. And so it stands to reason then that our emotions are easily tinkered with. And if our emotions are changing, that too is going to in fact impact the financial markets. And you want to add something to that. Add in the effect of the moon as it's going around planet Earth in 27.3 days. So we here on Earth are subject to a lot of cosmic forces, a lot of cosmic influence, and that in turn is what I think drives the financial markets. Something else to consider in all of this. Late 1800s, British mathematician Arthur Schuster, looking at sunspot data that he had recorded by looking through a telescope with a filter on it. Schuster took a look at this time series of data. With every passing day, there was an observation as to how many sunspots. And he said, okay, I'm going to apply the mathematics of a French mathematician called Fourier. And Arthur Schuster said, in this time series of sunspot data, when I apply the mathematics of Fourier and I do a Fourier transform, I can actually identify that my data for sunspots comprises cycles, and these cycles are overlapping with each other. They're embedded in one another. That gave rise to then something called the periodogram function. And mathematicians use it today in all sorts of signal analysis work and studies. If you are running the Optima software program, it actually has a periodogram function built into it. You can call up any price chart and you can tell the periodogram algorithm to run, and it will tell you what the dominant cycles are in a time series of data. Now, I make it sound straightforward. There's a bit of interpretation that you have to do, and you have to do some studying of periodograms to properly interpret the outcome. But when you do, you will be able to discern the dominant cycles in a time series of data. Up until now, I have simply taken the output of the periodogram function at face value. So if it gave me a number, I just said, that's it. That number is the dominant cycle. I didn't question it. But now that I've come across the work of Scafetta and Wilson and others, I'm realizing that I have to look at these dominant cycles, and I got to take it one step further. I have to think of these dominant cycles in terms of what is happening in the cosmos. And so, as an example, let's say that the periodogram for live cattle futures tells me the dominant cycle is 362 days. Okay? I'm no longer going to take that at face value. I'm going to ask myself, what is happening in our cosmos that is very, very close to 362 days? Well, obviously, it's the planet Earth going around the sun in 365 days. So now I'm going back and I'm looking at all of my analysis that I've done for the past year and a bit using the periodogram function. And I'm simply asking myself, what is it about this dominant cycle in any of these commodities or any of these indexes? What is it about this dominant cycle that ties back to events in the cosmos? I'll give you an example. Periodogram function says the dominant cycle on the S&P 500 is 1,037 days. Okay, what is that equivalent to? Is there something happening in the cosmos that occurs over 1,037 days? Well, yeah. That is very, very, very close to 12 sidereal cycles of Mercury going around the sun. That number is very close to 1.5 sidereal cycles of Mars going around the sun. That figure is also very close to 38 moon cycles. So you can see that we're not talking 2 or 3 decimal points here. We're talking whole integer numbers or very definitive fractions such as 1.5. So 12 cycles of Mercury, 1.5 cycles of Mars, 38 cycles of the moon going around the Earth. And that's why Tattersall and Scafetta and others say that our solar system is like a finely balanced machine. All of the parts have to work together. All of the planets have to go around the sun in their respective time frames. All of the planets have to orbit around their axis in their respective time frames. All of this has to work together to keep the whole system functioning, balanced, and in harmony. And then this whole system is what applies torque to the sun, which causes the sun to eject solar particles, which in turn affects our weather and our climate here on Earth, and also our human emotion, and the human emotion in turn affects the financial markets. So it's all one big resonant system. Let's take a look at this through the lens of an individual stock. The metals company, I think it's based in Canada somewhere, but it trades in New York on Nasdaq, ticker symbol TMC. Who are they? Where are they? What are they doing? Well, they're in the South Pacific near the island of Nauru. They've discovered that the seafloor around Nauru and some of the other nearby islands is littered with nodules, and you can see a picture of one in this slide. That nodule that's pictured here is actually made up of cobalt, nickel, copper, and manganese. So the metals company is saying, yes, all we have to do is take a big industrial vacuum cleaner, run it along the floor of the ocean, suck up these nodules, take them on shore, smelt them down, melt them down, and bang, we have got a beautiful new source of cobalt, nickel, copper, and manganese. Some of the environmental groups are saying, holy moly, not so fast. There is something called UNCLOS, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. There's something called the Law of the Sea, and there's all sorts of other legislation. And I think the metals company is going to be faced with a litany of lawsuits, and these various environmental groups are going to try to stop them, using the argument that you just don't run a vacuum cleaner along the bottom of the ocean and suck up these nodules, but you're going to be sucking up plant life, aquamarine life. You're going to be disrupting the whole ocean biosphere, and it's going to be an ugly, ugly fight. But I do think TMC stock is going to be volatile enough that a person could trade it in and out short term. Let's take a look at a chart. So here's a daily chart of TMC as it trades on Nasdaq, and I've run the periodogram function. The periodogram function came back and it said, okay, there's a couple dominant cycles that have been identified. One is 220 days. So I asked myself, what is 220 days? Is there something happening in the cosmos that's pretty close to 220? Well, yeah, it's one sidereal cycle of Venus. Is there something else that's happening? Well, 220 days is very close to 8 cycles of the moon going around Earth. 220 days is also very close to 7 axial spin cycles of the sun. Yes, the sun actually spins on its axis. The other dominant cycle is 273 days. What is that equivalent to in our system? Well, pretty obvious. 10 cycles of the moon, 27.3 days. It takes the moon to go around Earth from a fixed vantage point in the cosmos. So 10 times 27.3 is 273. On the chart, starting from a significant low back in December of 2024, I've overlaid some cycles, and the blue arcs going along the bottom of the chart are 27.3 day cycles of moon going around the Earth. Look at it very carefully, and you can see that the trend has a very high propensity to change as one moon cycle comes to an end and a new one starts. I've also annotated the chart with these larger cycles that appear as a pink dashed line. Those are the sidereal cycles of Venus. And you can see that early August is going to bring the end of one of these Venus cycles and the start of another one. And that's going to occur just slightly after one of these moon cycles. And so look as close as you want at this chart, but I think you'll agree that there is something to be said for using the cycles of the moon, 27.3 days, as a tool to help you trade on a short-term basis. None of this is without risk, so don't get the impression that I'm giving you the keys to the universe here. There's always risk in trading, and don't ever think otherwise. But I think you can use these moon cycles then in conjunction with something like a slow stochastic, and I've got that in the bottom pane of the chart here. And I'm using a 10-3 setting on the stochastic. Use the cycles of the moon and the stochastic, and I dare say you might enjoy some success with TMC. All right, that's it for me. You know where to find me, investingsuccess.ca, astrology letters cycle report. Starting to work here very shortly on the 2026 version of the Financial Astrology Almanac. And I will be including a lot of this heliocentric stuff based on the gravitational torque model of these academic researchers. If you are a Substack user, you will find quite a bit of my content up on Substack. I do these videos for free on YouTube, but I tend to add more content and have more videos on Substack. And in turn, I have even more content in my published subscriber-based newsletters. So thank you kindly for watching this one today, and we will talk again real soon.